Okay, today we're going to talk about hat etiquette and some rules and superstitions surrounding the cowboy hat. If you're new to this channel, please like this video. And if you want to subscribe, we'd love if you would do that. As we go along throughout this video, if you know of any other superstitions or etiquette things that we didn't talk about, please leave those in the comments. And hopefully we'll learn something just as much as you do as well. So to get started, we're going to talk about just some etiquette. Given that this piece of attire isn't just, like a shirt, there are rules surrounding the cowboy hat that are traditional to just history and function. So I'm just going to kind of go down the list, maybe not necessarily in importance. If you're a woman listening to this, a lot of the etiquette does not apply to you, given that the hat, in some cases, I'm not degrading it, but is more of a fashion piece, less than like a functional piece. It makes sense to stay with your outfit. So when you go in and out of church, you can keep it on. If you're in a wedding or a funeral, it makes more sense for you to do that. Also during the national anthem or a prayer, it is common for women to keep their hats on. So just as I go through all of these, just know that a bunch of this does not apply. This is kind of more towards males wearing them, but I think that's kind of a fun perk of being a girl wearing a hat. It's the first one, which to me is always baffling, is people that wear the hat incorrectly. Now, I'm not saying I wear it perfectly, but there's a few main points to talk about. So one would be that it's the correct direction. So there's a front and a back. Despite the way that I shape my hats, yes, there is a front and a back. If you don't know and you bought a hat, the easiest way to know just looking at it is that the buckle or the tie or the ribbon is going to be on the left side, looking down from the crown. So looking down, it's on the left side. If you flip the hat over, they'll have either, if it's a felt, usually they'll have a bow tied in the back of the hat. There's usually always a seam in the back of the hat so it doesn't rub the front. So believe it or not, I can't tell you how many rodeos, different things that I go to, and people find a way to wear their hats backwards. So just start with that. Along with that, if you're going to put a feather in your hat, if you're going to put, honestly, I've seen people do all kinds of stuff. It's traditional to put it on the left side. I've seen some Canadians put it on the right. I don't know if there's something to that. So if you're watching this from Canada and can chime in, please let me know. But that's just kind of a couple things to start with. The next is what hat to wear and when. So the rule of thumb is from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So the hotter months here in North America, you're going to wear a straw or a palm leaf like this. So something that makes sense to shade from the sun, but is also made to not make you too hot. Other than that, you should be wearing a felt. Now, this isn't like completely hard and fast. I've seen people do each whenever they kind of want to. To me, I think tradition matters for a reason. So especially if you're wearing the hat for function, definitely wear what's most functional. If it's cold, certainly wear this. I will, however, in the fall when it gets colder quicker, I might switch to a felt quicker, than most people would, or I might stick with a straw because sometimes in the fall it's hot and I don't really want to sweat. So that's just kind of a basic rule there. The next one is where to wear what type of hat. So we'll talk about weddings and funerals and stuff like that. Usually, if it's a nicer occasion, a felt hat is a nicer looking, more presentable hat to wear. So if you can and have multiple types of hats, definitely wear your felt in more dressy occasions. It's not to say there's not some nice straws that you can wear. If it's an outdoor wedding or something that's kind of more towards that casual, business casual, a straw is probably fine. But if it's a funeral, if it's a wedding, certainly wear your felt if it's clean. If it's not clean, just don't even go there. Then it's kind of where you can and cannot wear them. Inside buildings, depending on the building and what you're doing, it's okay to wear a hat. If it's a church, take it off. If the national anthem is playing, take it off, whether you're inside or outside. If you're praying, certainly take it off. I've heard people say going into banks and other places of business, it's also respectful to take it off. I think, the culture is changing, so do whatever makes the most sense for you. One place that I don't know why is hard to remember, but sometimes it is the dinner table. So you can be wearing around the house, doing your stuff, but as soon as you're eating a meal, usually that meal will start with prayer. If it doesn't, just remember to take it off, whether it's your house or someone that you respect's house. If you follow the letter to the law, you should take it off anytime you meet a lady. If you are a man, you should take it off if you meet really anyone new. especially someone older than you or someone you hold in high regard or respect. I don't do this ever because sometimes I feel like it makes people feel uncomfortable and it's maybe a little bit too formal. Depending regionally on where you live, it's very, culturally appropriate. So that's something you certainly can do. So that's kind of the tipping of the hat or stuff that you hear people taking their hat off. That would be when to wear it, when not to wear it. We'll keep going. So storing your hat, we talked about this in another video, and this is, I'm not saying, storing for months, but if you're going to take it off at the dinner table, where do you put it? How do you put it? You'll see in some of the pictures we have, the hats are flipped like this. That's literally for a picture. We have a video of how to properly store one, but it is traditional to store it on the crown. I like to, more often than not just store it on the crown, but find somewhere where it can set like that. So the crown isn't touching anything. And well, I mean, it's touching up here, but the brim's not touching anywhere, and it's just kind of out of the way. There's not always a good place just to set your hat down on the crown, so just kind of keep that in mind. When you're, asking, I guess, when you're asking, where you can put your hat in someone's home, put it wherever they tell you to. Don't just stick it on their couch. Don't just stick it on a piece of furniture that looks good to you. It might be disrespectful and almost as bad as putting your shoes down on something. So just think about that. In some instances, whether it's a lady or a man, someone might ask you to hold their hat while they do something, or I mean, honestly, there's not a ton of occasions where I need that done. But if you're going to, I'm going to show you kind of a respectful and functional way to do that. So if they hand you their hat, pretend that it's a tiny baby, not because it is that fragile, but if you're going to take someone's hat and mistreat it, it really speaks to the disrespect you have for them and their hat. So the best way I know how to do it is if they hand it to you, just stick your hand up inside and don't even put a fist. Just put your hand. Try to touch it with the least amount of fingers and either act like it's a deadly virus or a tiny baby. Just kind of hold it away from yourself. The worst thing you can do, this also applies when you're going hat shopping and you're picking hats off. If you just kind of grab it by the crown or you grab it by the brim, it could disfigure it a little bit. And so, honestly, for the most part, it's just respecting the person and respecting the quality of the hat that they have. So just hold it with as few fingers as you can. If it's windy, certainly you can cup it and just sit there and wait. This will happen whether someone's competing in a rodeo and their hat falls off, or you're shopping for hats, things like that. That's not that common, but it certainly is a way to show respect and responsibility, knowing that hats aren't cheap. This goes into the next thing, which in some research that we've done, this is apparently a big deal, and I was not aware, is you're not supposed to touch someone else's hat. Now, I think, like, for the most part, just don't touch people unless they ask you to touch them. And so this just is part of that. Apparently, if you do that, it's fighting words. You're about ready to start a bar fight. I've never been in one. I've never seen someone knock someone else's hat off. I can see now maybe that would be a big deal, but I guess if you're new to Western culture, just don't go anywhere close to someone's hat without permission. So those are basically just the etiquette stuff that I have. And then we're going to go into some superstitions, which, if you know cowboy culture and Western culture, there's always superstitions and legends. Whether truth is involved in that or not is hard to say. So one of them is putting a hat on a bed. This is one I've heard a million times. I've never been in an instance where I've had to put my hat on a bed, but there's some truth and some funny stories about that. One would be putting it on there is bad luck. In the olden days, there's different stuff, whether there was lice on, different people's beds that they were sleeping on, and it was a bad idea to put your hat on that. Then you'd put it on your own head and you just pass it around. Some people believe that little demons lived in or bad spirits lived in your hair. When you take your hat off, there'd be little shocks and sparks, and that was the evidence of that. And so you definitely didn't want to pass it on to your bed and sleep with all of that. They didn't know about static electricity, so that's probably where that came from. That's a superstition. You can live by it or not. I don't concern myself too much with that one. And then this other one I think is pretty funny is the reason why you don't store your hat with the brim down is because your luck is contained inside. And so if you do that, you pour your luck out, which I think is pretty funny. I'm not a big, luck, no luck type of person, but in cowboy culture, there's certainly a lot of superstitions like that keep people, I'm sure, on the straight and narrow. And then I talked about it before, but it is your feather, or if you're going to put something in your hat. I put toothpicks in my hat for literally no reason other than I saw old cowboys do it. I think they probably did it to have a toothpick when they needed it. I've heard people say that they would put toothpicks or a horseshoe nail in there just in case they needed to break out of handcuffs. I think that's a pretty cool story. I hope I never get to that point, but typically all that stuff should stay on the left. You'll see things move around a little bit, and that's just traditional from way back. Kind of, you pack your sword on your left side, especially in like a cavalry draw. You would, that gives your whole dominant side all the room in the world to fight. I don't really get in a whole lot of fights, so I don't really think about that. So that's kind of one of those funny things. But that's just kind of an overall summary of a few of the etiquette necessities for hats, and then some funny superstitions as well.